Welcome to another episode of Monday Morning CAD. Today we are taking this upper grille piece from my 1940 Chevy donor car that had an absolutely atrocious grill below it. And we're going to see if we can't turn it into something a little more what I'm after for the rat rod. Do me a favor, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do that. Like the video if you picked up any hints, and comment below if there's anything you need repeated or some help figuring out. And let's get at it. So first thing I did was take that piece and make it digital. Not a very complicated process, but not exactly what I wanted to focus on today. Obviously, what I'm about to do could be done without all of this. Made a simple hood piece. This is just for visualization, and modeled a 32 Ford grill or radiator because it's skinny, it's readily available, it's reasonably priced, and the line work here is basically a rough outline of what I'm kind of thinking I want for my lower grill. So what I'm going to do is I've got everything set up in layers here, so I went back through and removed all of my modeling pieces and leaving just my bare lines here. The upper line there, I just pulled duplicate line curves from my saw, so I'm going with the trim tool to remove those, and I'm going to start with this line here. Now I don't really have an exact plan here. I'm just kind of winging it. So I had this curve kind of set up pretty much how I like it. So what I did is I offset it 3/4 of an inch. My plan is to make each upright piece out of 1/8 inch stainless, with a couple of braces on the back side to hold everything together. And now, give it a little bit of meat. It's something I can polish up or let patina or whatever. I haven't quite decided yet, but I mean, really, I could make this out of mild steel. But 1/8 inch stainless is kind of what I'm looking at here. So I've kind of put a little bit of thought into it, so I'm a little bit ahead of the game here. I figure 3/4 of an inch deep will give me enough depth that it looks filling, and I'm spacing these 5/8 of an inch apart. Now, obviously, you've got to follow the curve of that upper piece, so all I'm doing is moving this over 5/8 of an inch, and I'm going to move it back until it lines up with that line. Copy the next one over 5/8 of an inch, move it back. Basically just repeating the same process over and over again here. I've got all the windows open because I'm obviously trying to get everything to line up in multiple planes here. And again, copy it over 5/8 of an inch. Now, to drag it back, all I'm doing is I'm using the move command, clicking on that front corner, and then I'm clicking on where it intersects. Makes it super easy. The intersection creates a point that's easy enough to see. I wanted a small flat section at the bottom of the grill, so I decided that 2 pieces on either side of center I'm going to leave flat. The next one I'm going to move up until it meets the curve. So since I've got it moved over or copied over the 5/8 of an inch, all I'm basically doing is dragging it up until my front view there, until it lines up, give or take, with that line. It's not exact science here. It's just kind of what I think will work. Again, this is one of those things where I can do a lot of this by feel, and it just kind of makes sense. And of course, as I'm working on it, I know I make a few mistakes along the way where I'm kicking myself for not doing it differently. But it's the beauty of this is that I can delete stuff, I can step back, I can just undo what I've done. And it's not really a big deal. I mean, it's not like I'm wasting metal here. I'm just moving pieces around. Now, the nice thing, or at least part of the reason that I shaped these grill slots the way I did, is because as I'm moving each one up and back, it's actually moving that curve. So instead of it just being a two-dimensional grill where it's just curved looking from the side, once this thing is all the way together, the curve in the grill is actually going to, as it moves to the side, it's going to move up in the grill, kind of give it a third dimension to its shape. So basically all I'm doing here over and over again is just copy over. I'm moving it back until it lines up at the top. Once I moved it back so it lines up at the top, I can move it up so that it lines up at the bottom. Now, this is a little bit repetitive at the moment, but I wanted to see kind of how it looks, so I'm going to use the extrude planar curve command under the solids menu, and then up top I clicked both sides yes. Now the reason being is that my first piece is actually centered, so I wanted to make sure this piece stayed centered, and all I've got to do is right click, it opens up the same command again, and do that for every piece that I've now put in. And I can actually kind of get a visual representation, grab everything on the right side of center, mirror it, and it gives me that center profile. And now we can kind of see the shapes that I've got starting to develop. And I mean, at this point, I know that I'm kind of on the right track. I can throw my upper grill piece and my mock hood piece back on the top. The car's not going to have a full hood, but I want that top piece of the hood, the curve there, just to fill it out. Plus, for the size of the rad I'm looking to fit, I think this piece is going to be necessary, and it just kind of completes the look of it. I want it to look like everything belongs. So once I had that done, all I did was undo my mirror. There's no reason to have all the pieces on one side. I've got a little bit more work to do these. So what I want to do is I want to delete all of my solids and go back to my line work. I'm looking at this piece, and I already know that I don't want these pieces extending past the back of the shell. I want it to be a consistent shape. So all I'm doing here is I'm actually grabbed the line tool, and I grabbed from the side, and in the top window as I get to it, you can see that it's actually grabbing perpendicular. Now, all that means is that it's hitting the piece in line straight to 90 degrees. Since I don't have to cut off the center one, I don't have to go any further than that. And that's giving me a line that if we look from the side, I could actually see that that's straight in line. So all I'm doing is I'm grabbing my line tool, and I can bring a line straight down from that point. Again, going perpendicular. A lot of times I'll just go to my side view and I'll extend it down past. It doesn't need to stop there, because when I go in with my trim tool, I can actually just trim away. And all I'm looking for in the window here is when it says perpendicular, because you can see in the three-dimensional view, your eyes, it kind of plays tricks on you. Everything goes to perspective and vanishes, so the lines aren't all straight. So sometimes switching back and forth to the views can be handy, especially if you can't find that perpendicular really quick. In this case, I managed to get them all perpendicular, so not a big deal. And you can see in my bottom right window there that now that I've trimmed those are all in line to the middle one. The only thing that's not done is they haven't been radiused, which that I can do as my final command once everything's done and I'm getting my pieces ready to cut. So from this point, what I start doing is, since I know I'm going to be lopping off each piece at the back there, I'm pretty sure at this point I start making sure that I'm doing each of these commands as I go, because doing them all at once kind of sucks. When you forget to copy and actually just type move, you end up with a piece with a giant gap. So this is actually, a clip of me making a mistake. So click Control Z, it just undoes. And this time we will copy it over 5/8 of an inch instead of moving it. And from there, I want to move it from that point back, line it up till it's intermittent, and then slide it up. Once it's slid up, I can go in and trim off the top, and I can trim off the back as well. The thing is, this starts to get a little bit repetitive, so I'll do a couple more of these and then I'll just skip ahead, just because otherwise this video will be hours long, and there's some other stuff I want to show here. So once I get a little bit of this done, we're just going to skip a bunch and scan forward. You can see right there, it tried to grab the wrong corner, so that's why dragging the line long, cutting off the tail, can actually be super helpful. Some of these pieces as they go, because the bottom is radiused as well, I actually had to move them back down and extend the top back up. But as you can see, skipped the rest of these pieces here and then went in and actually finished out all of the side here off camera, and I'm just extruding everything here so we can get a solid look at the grill with every slot in place, all of the uprights all the way out to the side, before we go any further, because at this point that's kind of what's needed. It's the nice thing about modeling in 3D is that we can take the time and actually extrude everything. A lot of times I'll make files like this just with lines if I'm absolutely positive that what I'm working on is going to be exactly what I'm after, because I've been doing this long enough that it's not a big deal. The other thing that extruding actually helps is this one piece here. What I'm going to do is I drag this out 10 inches because when I went to extrude it, it gave me an error. It said intersecting curves will produce something. Basically what it's saying is that it would not extrude it. Now, when I zoom in on it, and I zoom in on the points there, these top ones are fine, that top point's fine, but if we look at the bottom, that one extended past. Now, it can't extrude that curve properly because it was not one closed curve. That single line that just extended a little bit long, it pushed it past, and that stopped it from being extruded. So as soon as I trimmed that line off, I could move it back into place, I could extrude it, we can grab everything on that side, and we can mirror it to the other side. And, well, it didn't take too long. It's probably, 15 minutes off camera. That's about what it took to finish modeling up this grill that you didn't see. And that gives us with pretty much a complete lower shell looking piece there. And this is kind of the vision I had going on for it. Nothing super specific. Honestly, if it wasn't for the radiator, I'd probably taper the sides higher up, but you know, once I've got this thing sitting in front of the rad, I mean, a 32 rad is actually a big rad, but I'd like the capability to put a reasonably large motor into it, and trying to source a rad that's not $1,500 and custom. The 32 rad, I think, is gonna work out for me for what I'm after. So it doesn't 100% cover the corners here, but I think once it's all modeled up in the car, which I have the frame, basically a rolling chassis, modeled up in another file here. So once we're done, I can actually import this file in, and we can take a look at how it fits, compare it to the rest of the car, and see what we're actually working with. But I mean, the perspective view here, I can spin everything around. Now, the hood piece on the top there, we'll end up making that with English wheel planishing hammer, take your pick. So that upper hood piece could change. We could set it up so that it's the same curve as the radiator and make everything look in place. It's just kind of there for visual right now, because that's not a piece that I'm going to cut on the CNC. What I'm looking at right now is I do need some support ribs, something that we can weld onto the back of the grill section. So all I've done is taken the curved line tool here, and I'm setting my control points to the center of each one of these ribs. Just because I want something that lines up easily here. It's a super easy point to grab. I just grab the midpoint of every one. It means that my curve is going to line up super well. That one rib pokes out a little bit further because of the bump out there. So all I'm doing is putting my point there, and then I'm going to grab that curve and mirror it off of center, which will give us our entire width. And with the piece mirrored, we can click them both, join them together. This gives us one continual curve. It comes in handy that way. And all I'm doing is moving it out to the side here. You know, you can set your distance, move it out to the side. I'm offsetting it 3/4 of an inch because I figure 3/4 of an inch is enough meat that we're not going to have to worry about it. I don't like that point there in the middle, so all I did was grab my radius tool and radius that point. I'm going to drag a line in from the side so that we can complete this, and we're going to trim off our points. And then I can go into my solids menu, use extrude planar curve, and this time we're just going to extrude it to one side. We don't need this one to both sides again. So I'm copying my outline down because I know I want a rib in that area as well. And I'm going to move them both into the middle here. Now, for these to work, I don't just want them stacked on the back. I want a piece that actually lines up. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to move it in 1/4 of an inch. Now, it's going to overlap more than 1/4 of an inch, but my reason for doing this is that I'm extruding this here. I change it to one side so that I just extrude to the bottom, extrude it 1/8 of an inch, and you can see that it overlaps there. So I'm going to select all of my ribs, and then I go into the solid edit menu and click difference, and then I'm going to click on my new rib piece, and that will remove that entire section from my vertical ribs. Now I grab that assembly again, and I'm going to move it 1/4 inch in again, and we're going to grab that piece, and then we're going to go back into the solid edit menu, click difference, but this time we're going to select all of the vertical ribs. And what that's going to do is that's actually going to remove a notch, like you can see right there, out of the rib. Now what that means is that these ribs actually are they overlay on the support piece by 1/2 inch out of the 3/4 of an inch that they actually are, which I think that's going to be more than enough. Now, looking at this lower rib area here, the shape has just changed too much, because as we moved the ribs up, what that did is that actually tightened the curve at the bottom. So the radius at the bottom of the grill is quite a bit different than the radius at the top of the grill. I wanted to throw that piece in there, kind of hoping that if I slid it back and realigned it, it would work. But that's not really going to work. Now, it's a little bit difficult to do the exact same thing I did at the top, because I can grab the lines and I can attempt to grab each one of these in the middle and keep it perpendicular, but it's not super easy. So what I'm doing here is I've created a solid, and I'm going to work the other way. I've grabbed a solid, I've clicked the solid edit menu. I'm going to use difference. I use my ribs to remove the pieces. Now, since this solid piece extends past all of the ribs, what that's going to give me is an actual cutout of that exact spot in the grill. So just like the top, now I have mid pieces that I can grab just like I did at the top. As opposed to trying to find them on my file, I can grab my curve edit tool here and just set my control points to the middle, just like I did on the other one. The only difference is that now I'm starting with a negative copy of it as opposed to the positive model. I use this trick a lot when I'm trying to find spots all on the same plane. In this case, it's super easy to see this visually, and this process is going to be the exact same as it was for doing the upper piece, just this one I'm not having to, this one I'm working on the negative. But literally this is the exact same process other than that. So I can now take that piece, I can mirror it. We don't need the solid piece anymore because I've already mirrored it out. And you can see, like, moving all of those ribs around, you can see what that did to the profile of the grill. It gave it quite an interesting shape, honestly, because of the curve of the upper grill affecting how far back everything was moved, and then my lower profile affecting how I moved everything. It actually gave it a shape that honestly I wasn't quite expecting. I was expecting the curve to stay a little bit more gradual. At this spot in the grill, it's not exactly a super smooth curve, but I really like what it did to the lines, so I'm keeping it. But same as the last piece, we're extruding the curve. We're going to move it back into its location, and we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to use this piece, we're going to go into the solid edit menu, and we're going to use the difference after we've moved this in 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to do it all over again. Now I'm looking at this and noticing that I stopped at the center of that piece, which means it's not got the overlap once we moved it in. And if you look at the top, you can see it there as well. So when I pull this apart to make my final cut pieces for the plasma table, I'm just going to make notes that when I pull all these out and I lay them flat, I'm actually going to end up having to extend those pieces, just because I want that weld surface on the outer one, but I do not want this piece wrapping around to the outside. It would look out of place. So that's something I'm going to end up doing when I get to my final cut piece. Instead of working backwards here, I'll just deal with it when I get to the end. I've got some notes on some things I need to modify as I go. And the process is, again, the exact same as the upper. Grab everything, and it removes the notch out of all of my pieces except for the very outer one. And it's going to remove the notch from my cross rib, doing it the opposite way. That gives us means the entire grill will now key together on those two pieces. And once it's keyed together and that top is flat, it means that everything has to line up. But I don't like just those two pieces. It leaves the bottom unsupported. Plus, I want a good place to put some mounts. So the upper mount is actually, or the upper cross rib is actually going to get some extensions for mounting holes when I pull it apart. And the lower piece that I'm about to design is going to get some extensions as well. I want, even if it's 2 or 3 bolt holes per piece, it's going to need them so that everything has a place to mount to. But just blasting along here, this process is again going to be the exact same as the last two. I'm just using my curve tool and I'm dropping edit points on the midway of each one of these ribs. This time we're doing it on the vertical plane because we want the exact same rib, but we want it to hit every rib along the back side here, which will hold. That means that the top and the bottom will all be contained. We've got one rib in the middle to stop everything from flexing. That should be more than enough support. Now, in this case, I've already radiused that piece right there, so I can't grab the middle right at the bottom. And the downside to the curved tool here, you can see how it kind of misses the corner on the way down and then crosses over the middle of the next piece. Not the end of the world by any means. This isn't something that needs to line up to the end. It can be a curve. I'm not really concerned about it, but you can see I can grab the curve points and I can move them around pretty easily. That way I get a little bit more coverage. Either way, it's not really hurting anything. It's more aesthetics at this point, which, when I think about it, it's not going to be a big issue because it's going to be hidden. It's not going to the outside edge. This piece is going to end up moved up on the pieces. It's not going to come flush, and you'd have to be looking at it at exactly the right angle to even notice that it was even not quite there. But again, I pull this one out to the side, and on this one, we already know that I don't have them extended enough on the side. So on this one, I'm going to extend this line up 1/2 inch. That'll give me 1/2 inch along that rib that I can weld to, and instead of just coming across to the point, go up 1/2 inch and over. This is what like I said, this is what the other ribs or other cross pieces are going to need to hold all those ribs up. Weirdly enough, it kept grabbing the perpendicular to line there, so I ended up undoing it, but it's just Control Z and everything undoes. I radiused over my pieces because that point looked a little bit out of place. Join everything together and we'll move it back into place and do the exact same solid difference that we did before. Everything's repetitive. So many of these commands throughout my videos. I mean, the solid difference, the copy, the mirror, certain line tools, they all seem to do the same thing. Now what happened here is that somewhere along the line, probably in the middle, I grabbed not in the same plane. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go down to my front view there, and you can kind of see how the lines don't quite line up in the middle, and when you extrude it, it tries to go down instead of in line with the piece. So we're going to go down to here, and we're going to go project to C-plane, and now what that does is that sends that whole assembly flat to the 0 plane of the software. If we look from the side view, we can see where that ends up, and all I'm going to do is drag it from the middle of that piece to the middle of our piece there. It's not critical where this lines up at all, so it's not really a big deal. but we're going to drag it up and then copy the process, because that project to C plane, if we hadn't have done that and had just sent that piece out to get cut without the slots, obviously, what would have ended up happening is the computer wouldn't have been able to interpret it in 2 dimensions, because the computer would have seen the extra dimension. It would have seen it in another plane, and they tend to do weird things. I've sent files to my plasma table before where all of a sudden it would freak out and send a line diagonally in no reasonable direction and cut my piece in half. Once upon a time, it tried to do that to an entire 4x8 sheet. So on stuff where I'm working in 3 dimensions, after I lay everything out and get all my curves done, I've got them on a flat plane. I've made it a habit to always project a C plane, just in case I've got pieces on different planes. Even if you import them and they're all perfectly flat on the same plane, but they're not at the same height, or at the same Z height. Sometimes the computer freaks out about it when it interprets it. It happens more often when I'm nesting it in Rhino, and then sending out a nested file. But I've definitely had it happen before. But, as I'm talking here, I'm repeating the steps that I did on the first 2 pieces, and that gives us a lower grill shell with all 3 bases in place. So with that, I can turn my upper grill piece back on, my hood piece back on, my radiator back on, and we can see the entire assembly sitting in front of the radiator. And honestly, for how big and bulky this radiator is in my particular application, being that my car is super low, it doesn't look too out of place. And once I threw it into the car, I realized that I didn't want the radiator I didn't want the radiator on the front side of the axle, but the way I have this all lined up, the radiator was not going to fit behind the axle with the grill there. So I actually stood the radiator up as tight to the vehicle as I could, kicked the grill out further. I want kind of the leaned look. I'm probably going to adjust that upper hood piece when I build it, obviously. Something that lines up super well. The way this is all drawn up, it looks like my beam axle will tuck in between my radiator and my grill shell. I'm kind of looking the way that looks, but you can see by the model here, when you look to that compared to my cowl, my grill and my radiator are already a solid, probably 3 inches higher, probably 2 to 3 inches higher than the highest point of my cowl. And that's with just using the absolute minimal height. The cross brace in my frame is going to end up moving. That was just there for kind of visualization. And looking at this grill here, what I'm probably going to do is actually pinch off my frame some and bring it into pretty much the width of my radiator, which means when I built this frame, if you've watched that video, I actually straightened out the frame instead of letting it taper. It's looking like I may let that taper continue all the way from the B-pillar where it goes straight back to the rear axle. I may let it taper the entire rest of the way. But that's pretty much a decision to be made once I get a little bit further. For today, this video was on the grill. I've accomplished what I was after. I've designed a billet style grill for the rat rod. I've got something that visually I'm quite pleased with, and I've been able to go through the process. I really hope that you guys, if you're watching this video, I really hope that you were able to pick up some pointers and learn a little bit here. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, do me a favor, subscribe to the channel. It'd mean a lot to me. I'm loving the whole YouTube thing. I'm having a blast, but let's see if we can help this channel grow. Like the video, shoot me a comment below if you picked something up. If there's something you missed or there's something you want to see in more detail, leave me a comment and I will do my best to do that. And I'm going to get another video going back on the car for Wednesday and Saturday. I'll see you next time.